Welcome to the Predictable Revenue Podcast, where sales leaders teach you what's working for them and how you can build it yourself.
This episode of the Predictable Revenue Podcast is brought to you by our sales coaching and consulting services. Are you looking to create repeatable, scalable, and predictable revenue? We've helped thousands of companies grow their business with tailored expert advice backed by testing to ensure they establish the best practices that'll work for them. Head over to bit.ly/predictable revenue coaching to learn more.
Jesui, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Glad to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
I'm happy to have you on. Today, as I mentioned in the intro, we're talking about SDR mindset and some habits. And I thought you would be the perfect person to come on here because currently you're helping our entire sales development organization, which is not something that many people have had the opportunity to be involved in sales development from that level and that scale. But also you started out as an SDR here. And I would argue you were successful in spite of predictable revenue. And by that, I just mean that I don't think when we had initially hired you, I don't think we hired you into the best system of onboarding, of SDR management, we had a lot to learn. And so why that's relevant is I think Jesui had a lot to do with Jesui's success. It wasn't because, we are the greatest organization and, we did this, 100 out of 100 training. I think we've made significant strides, and that was a long time ago. But I think that was the reason why I think this is going to be particularly interesting, because if you're listening and you're an SDR, this is not just somebody who is in an SDR manager role and doesn't know, or hasn't done it recently, doesn't know what it's all about. Jesui was here. She was successful in spite of the training and onboarding that she might have gotten. And I'm not saying it was awful, but I think it has gotten a lot better along the way. And you were still one of our all-stars and you managed to come through that. So I imagine there's some SDRs that are listening that might resonate with that experience. And I think the conversation we had earlier was one of the reasons why you're here is the mindset. And so talk to me about what your SDR mindset was coming into this role or just coming into the SDR role in general.
Yep, absolutely. First of all, I'd like to say that I think no organization is perfect, and part of those if you want to say flaws on anything like onboarding and training, that's what actually helps. And we're not in a phase where we got hit by a pandemic, so that's not the same learning at the office and with your peers rather than you're alone at home and working remote. We're all figuring that out. So that's what actually I wanted to talk about this topic particular, because the SDR mindset kind of became a habit to me. I kind of made it a habit, made it part of my routine. So first of all was understanding the role. I have a background in sales, but none of it was B2B or outbound or this kind of sales, right? So it was mostly B2C or others. So first of all was understanding my role as an SDR. People say it's a junior role, and I think there's a misconception there that is not as relevant maybe as a senior role like an AE or an account strategist or something like that. But if you think about it, SDRs are the pillar of outbound. Without them, this wouldn't be possible. Who's going to reach out to prospects, right? There's a reason why there are SDRs out there, and we have to kind of raise the awareness on that. And once you understand that and you have a mission with your company and they trust you to do that, then you have to get into it, right? Into getting there. Okay, how do I achieve my mission? How do I hit my goals? And as an SDR, all you want to do is book meetings and hit your quotas and crush it, but you don't want to pick up the phone. You don't want to reach out to people and you don't want to get into the work of doing it. It's not because you're lazy or you just don't want to do it. People out there, the role becomes with a lot of challenges. And that's why I have to emphasize that this is not a junior role anymore. There's a misconception there. You have to go out there and make calls, and people out there will be rude, mean, or straight up assholes. They would just don't want to talk to you. And, that's tough. Who wants to start a day and saying no, bye. I don't want to listen to you. Stop calling. So, eventually you become thick-skinned with that. But to get there, you have to, like learn to deal with rejection and learn from your mistakes and saying like, okay, they said no, what can I do better? And then just like understand the fact, like kind of like embrace it and saying like, okay, this is not personal. This is not on me. And just like acknowledge that everyone sucks at first. Like that's just one big thing.
Everybody sucks at first. Nobody's good.
Yeah.
No, nobody's good. Even I was
No.
terrible. My first calls were absolutely awful. Everybody we've hired, their first calls, their first emails, like everything is bad. But the only thing you can know conclusively is that the first calls you're going to make are going to be bad. The first emails you write are going to be wrong, but it's an iterative process.
And the role plays. I hated role plays. I almost cried during my first role play. I was like, I'm not good for this. Like, I want to quit. But as much as we hate them, role plays work. And it's good if like your worst call is during a role play, because that's like the worst case scenario. But also,
why did you hate doing
inevitably-
role plays? Let's talk about that.
Yeah, of course. I mean, it's just like the pressure. Like when I joined, I was like new at this business, like 100%. And then I would see everyone else like, oh, everyone else knows what they're doing. Like, oh my gosh, they're so good. And they're like asking me questions and I look dumb. Like, I don't know what to say. So I think it was more like the peer pressure in that case, that I was like, they're all so good and I am not. And oh my gosh, no, I'm making a fool of myself. And because the potential of your coworkers, the potential of everyone else working at the office, and I think it's also the expectation they have on you. And again, like once you understand your role, it's like, oh my gosh, I have to perform. I have to do it for the company. So I think that was like the thing like I hated the most about it. But then when I started, like when we were still at the office and I started to kind of like listen to other people, like how they were doing the calls and stuff like that, I was like, no, actually everyone is going through this. Like we're all in this together, because like we kind of like understand, we can relate for our own like pains and stuff like that. So then like I kind of lost the fear in that. And then I was like, again, it's part of becoming like thick-skinned on that. Like I was like, okay, someone hung up on me. Maybe I was the 7th caller of the day and I didn't do anything outstanding to impress them. They didn't want to talk to me. Like, okay, what can I do to get better then? So that is also like part of creating that mindset, I've known like other SDRs, I've worked with SDRs that they are like, they take it too personal and they're like, oh no, it's because someone yelled at me. Oh my gosh. But if as an SDR, you just can't take it personal. They're not yelling at you. Like, you don't know what happened during your day. They're busy. Maybe they're frustrated with the issue you're calling to fix. And they just don't know it,
Yeah. Maybe they got yelled at. Maybe they need to go to the washroom and they're like about to walk in and you interrupted them.
And you're like, oh,
Who
damn
knows?
it, no. Yeah.
I had a prospect when I wasn't cold calling. I was like knocking on doors. It was selling into construction, and a guy literally threw a license plate at me. Like I walked onto his job site and he yelled, I won't yell exactly what he yelled, but get something out of here. And then he fired a license plate at me and I was like, oh, I better get out of the job site.
Yeah. But you see, that won't happen as an SDR. You don't have to get there. Like they can throw you anything. So the worst thing they can do, they will just hang up on you. So you're good.
Yeah. You're not that I was in that much danger, but like it wouldn't have felt good,
No, of course not. Like,
Tell me about how your first week went and like what you were thinking.
I was thinking about quitting, to be honest with you. I was like, I'm not going to make it. I remember I reached out my podmate at the time and I was like, I'm not good at this. Like, what did I do? What did I get myself into? And he was like, no, don't worry. It's just the first week. Like, easy. Like, like, first of all, there's a lot of information. And then now, and I think it got better once, like, I interviewed my first client and they were like, okay, we want you to work for us. And I was like, really? Me? Out of all these people? Why? So then I was like, okay, they saw something in me. So I started okay, I just like decided I was going to be good at this. I made that decision and I committed myself, and I was like, maybe if I'm not a natural, I'll get there. So I would like study and role play and ask for shadowing sessions and ask for feedback and submit my calls for review and stuff like that until I got there. And the cringiest thing I would do, I would listen to my calls and I would be like, oh, why did I say this? Like, oh no. So that's another thing, like everyone hates doing it. Like no one wants to listen to their calls, but that's the best thing you can do. Like,
100%. I used to hate listening to these podcasts. And then the first time I did, it was like listening to nails on a chalkboard. I'm like, oh, I can't believe I like wore that green shirt for this. I can't believe I said that. I was talking to the mic or the mic was too hot or whatever it is. The thing I wanted to touch on for a second is you said, oh, you're not a natural. Do you think natural salespeople exist?
I think there are people with the capacity and to do it and the natural potential to do it. You know, like people that are extroverts and they are natural talking and they're like, oh, and they can engage into a conversation. But being a natural doesn't mean that you're going to be good at it, you know, because there's still like some part of commitment on that you have to kind of like, you have to commit to be there. Like being a natural, you still have to stick to your KPIs. You still have to stick to your, you know, making the calls and going above and beyond and not just like saying and settling for that and saying like, I'm good and this is it. Like, that's all I get. Like you always like, you have to keep learning. Like this business 100%. Is constantly changing. It's constantly like moving, the market, everything happening like out there in the world, and you have to move with it. You can't just keep doing the same things as you did on the first week or the first year, because you might have been like a great SDR last year, but what about this year and this world and what's happening right now? You have to kind of get like with the trends. So if you're a natural, talk to people and people will listen to you and you have talent, but you don't grow that talent, you grow with it and you don't evolve, then you'll get stuck there, kind of.
100% agree. I think I grew up, I've always been a talker, and I've had people that don't know sales say, oh, you're a natural salesperson. And I think what they mean is like, oh, you talk a lot. Like, would you please shut up? It is like the kind way of saying, oh, you're a natural salesperson. So I had this mindset coming in. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm a natural salesperson. I was a terrible cold caller. Like, I don't think introvert or extrovert, I don't think anybody's good when you first start. And so like some people might be a little bit more predisposed to be on a podcast and to host a podcast. And yes, I probably had some things that made things a little bit easier. But at the same time, I remember those cold calls, my early cold calls. And I remember staring at that list or staring at that book, and like, they were not good cold calls. And I think the thought that like, oh, I'm not a natural, I'm not good at this, I'm not naturally good at this, and so therefore I should quit my first week. I think the natural is kind of a myth, because cold calling is a weird thing, right? You normalize it and you get used to it over time, and it gets so much easier now. But to get used to just calling people, I mean, hey, you know, can I bother you? Can I ask you a couple questions? Can I call you out of the blue? Can I interrupt you from your coffee, your breakfast, your whatever? Nobody was born good at that. They might have some attributes that make it a little less terrifying, a little bit easier. But I think the idea that these natural salespeople exist, and that the people that you're looking up at in your SDR career, the people that have been there for 6 months or 12 months or 18 months, the secret is they sucked too. Yeah. And the only reason people could say and point to like that I'm a good SDR is like, all of my early call recordings don't exist. There's no proof. There's no recorded proof that I was awful.
Yeah. I remember there was a time I had a call that I was awful, but back in the day, our manager would just like go and ask to the team leads and say like, pick the worst calls and we'll put them on our call review on Thursday. And I was like, that call was so bad. I was like, I'm sure this one will go there. Delete, no evidence, didn't happen. Forget about it. That will die with me. But yeah, at the end of the day, we all have those calls, right? Like we're all there, and it is, yes, it is a weird thing. I think like I was trying to say, it's like I've worked with SDRs like 3 years now, I think, and I've seen like even in my time as a manager, I've managed SDRs that I like they were like kind of like, when I say like natural, it's like they already had that mindset, and they already had that like thick skin built on their bodies, and they were like rejection. What is that like? Or they got rejected, and they go call back and say like, hey, I think like something happened with the call. Must be my internet. So can we continue? Like that. Like they were super
such a good
bold,
line.
and I was like, wow, like, yeah. But I wouldn't say like it's a problem, but the thing with them, the issue was like they would take that for granted and say like, I'm great, I'm awesome at it. Don't give me feedback, like, and if you would listen to a call and saying like, hey, actually you could have done this better, they would be like, what are you talking about? I'm awesome. And then eventually they will start like, like, yes, hitting quota, and then you would see like a lower trend in there, and their volume will down, and they would be in a slump. And I think when you're not that self-aware, it's when you kind of like get in those like ugly, nasty slumps, and you're like, you can't get out of the hole, because it's like, I can't. But it's not like you can't. It's
see
just
it.
like, exactly.
If you're not open to that feedback, if you're not looking for it, or if you're not looking for the feedback, or if you're not open to it, like other people are telling you things, but you're hearing the reality, but you're like, no, that's not right. And then you sit there and you're like, why do I suck at this? Like, and it's such a weird, I have been there too recently, not for cold calling, but other things where I'm like, no, I'm really good at this. And other people are kind of dropping hints, and you're not really missing it. And so unless you're like radically open to this feedback and like, hey, I'm just here to try and get better, then it's really hard to, it's really easy to miss that feedback.
Yeah.
And so we're talking SDR mindset. So the first piece for you is like, it sounds like, don't quit in your first week because everybody sucks.
Yeah.
Next piece is open to feedback, looking for feedback, seeking out feedback. Is that the right way of capturing that?
Yeah. And self-awareness, like that is important. Like the best SDRs that we've had in predictable revenue, they're like incredibly self-aware. And we've had SDRs that come here and they struggle at the beginning, but they are like always looking for feedback. And like, I think like how coachable you are, it's also like important on that, and being open to listen. Like when you look for feedback, you don't expect anyone to say like, what are you talking about? You're great. Like this call was awesome. You're looking, and if you listen to that, you would want to dig further and say like, tell me like the bad things, like be critical with me. I want to learn. I personally
look for feedback, not praise.
Exactly. I personally hate it when people say like, no, you're doing great. It's like, no, I know I'm not. Tell me something. Like, don't be afraid to hurt my feelings. You won't. So like when you look for feedback, just expect that feedback. Look for the harsh feedback. That will get you there. That will make you better. It might hurt at the beginning. It will be like, oh man. But then you will be like, that won't happen again, and I'll learn from it, and you'll be better.
And I think it makes it easier when you're seeking it out, because you're like, hey, how can I get better at this? It's not one thing that I think people frame up the feedback. They frame up feedback as criticism. They're like, hey, I got one piece of criticism. And criticism has like an implication that you did something wrong or you did something bad. Whereas I think feedback can be shaped and slanted in a way of like, here's what you could do better next time, because there's going to be a next time. And I think that's one thing. Like there's a ton about, I read a great book called Nonviolent Feedback, which is really, really helpful for if you are a jerk like me who struggles to say things kindly when you have these kind intentions, but it just comes out in like the meanest possible way. That's a really helpful book to be less of an asshole. It should say how to be less of an asshole. If your name is Collin Stewart, you should read this book. That was a helpful one. But from the SDR perspective, thinking about it as something that you're seeking out. You are a professional athlete. You're trying to work on your shot, your pass, your plays, and you're not going to be perfect, and you're going to need to get better. And so how can we get a little bit better?
Yeah, correct. Just embrace that and learn from it. And learn from others. Honestly, don't wait until you make the mistake to learn from it. You can always learn from your peers. And I would do that. Like we had like the sessions on Thursdays that were like our whole reviews, and I would listen. And if someone would say something that I was saying or not doing right, I would be like, oh my gosh, not gonna be me next week. So like, okay. So I think that is also important if you're working as a team, and also take advantage of it, because I think like no one will understand an SDR just like another SDR. So peer support is good on that end. Like you'll speak the same language, and I think nowadays there are more not self-awareness, but more like awareness of the SDRs out there. Like I've seen like pages of SDRs on Instagram or on TikTok as well, and they post memes that you can relate to. So I think that also you have to take that as well with a little bit of humor to make it more digestible day to day. And I'm not saying it's an awful job. I mean, it's just like, it is not an awful job. It's actually entertaining when you manage to do it and you're like in that stage, like, oh, I got this. So yeah.
I think especially if you're... Especially if you get a little creative with your openers. Like I was just doing some call coaching, call review with one of our SDRs, and one of the ones that came out of the vault of whatever was floating around up here that I used to use was when I was calling in the morning. You know, hey, this is Collin from blah 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 blah. Have you had your coffee yet? As opposed to like, did I catch you at a bad time? Because then it's not what they're expecting. They're usually like, oh, this is a cold call, but now you're asking if I've had my coffee. And they're like, no, I haven't had my coffee. It's like, oh, would you like me to call you back after? Or are you more of a tea drinker? You can branch out. And it's such a silly opener. But for me, it just made it just like 4% silly, which was just enough to kind of keep me engaged and going forward. Yeah. And like having these interesting opportunities within your day to like show your personality. You don't have to be funny or silly if that's not you, right? Like if I gave you a script and like a pattern that worked for me, it might not work for you. You probably have to change the words a little bit because it's not going to be natural. But I think to your point earlier, it's a hard job. I know one of the things we talked about was getting creative, and I'd love to understand how you kind of carry that into the role.
Yeah. I mean, it's all about I'm an empath. Like I'm really empathetic with people. So I think like it's also like something to do with an SDR. You have to be empathetic, and in order to get creative there and understand like, okay, it's 9 a.m., 10 a.m. So you might be the 7th caller of the day. You might be the first one. It's so hard to be the first one. I don't think you'll ever be the first one. You imagine you'll be the 7th caller of the day. Like this person already has like a lot of like voice notes in their mailbox and a lot of emails in their inbox, and then you're calling and they're rushing. And then you have to be empathetic enough to understand like their rush and whatever they're dealing with, but not too empathetic to say like, oh, I'm not gonna bother you, you know. But then because of that, you have to be creative and like think about something that will make you outstand of all the SDRs out there. You have to be human. And I think one of the biggest mistakes some SDRs out there are making, it's like they take it too serious. Like as if this is like, oh, I'm reaching out to a VP, I'm reaching out to a director or head of department or a CEO, whatever. And it's not like you don't have to be professional, but at the end of the day, they're human as well, like you. They might have like missed the boss. They might have just like woken up with a headache or hangover. You don't know. Like they're humans. So treat it as it is. I remember there was a time I reached out to a prospect and he clearly sounded like in a rush, and he was like kind of pissed. And the first thing that came out of me, I was like, oh, hey, did I catch you in a good mood? And he just chuckled and he was like, sorry, what's up? Like, kind of understand, like, okay, it's not their fault. Like, it's not her fault that I'm just, like, rushed or something. And then I was like, okay. And then I took that. I saw my opportunity. I took it and I continued with the call. So, like that opener of the coffee. Or maybe if you're reaching out and it's like 1 p.m. saying like, hey, did I catch your lunch break? Or have you had your lunch? Or how was lunch? Or something, like something that will be outstanding. Something that you might have catch under LinkedIn that has nothing to do with their company or whatever. Like you don't want to seem like a stalker and saying like, hey, I saw your picture on Christmas 2020. How was how was Turkey? No, you don't want to do that. Like, hey, Collin, how are the twins? And you'll be like, what? So,
what?
Yeah, he's like, no, you don't want to do that. But maybe like people now are becoming more and more open in LinkedIn. So maybe they posted something like, there's like a lot of like mental health awareness or a lot of movements going on. So if they mention something, they repost or something like that, you can always say like, hey, actually, like I was looking forward to connect with you. I saw your post on LinkedIn about, XYZ or about you went hiking. How was it? Like I've never visited that place. Did you like it? Or something like that. And they would be like, who are you? But then people love to talk about themselves. They love it. Like, and that's a way, at the end of the day, yes, your product is important. Yes, you're reaching out because you want to make their life easier, but people buy people. So it's how you present it. And they're, at the end of the day, they're not going to listen to the wonders of your product. They're listening to the person who is talking about it and the story and the way they're transmitting and, like the intention of the people that are just reaching out to say, like, I really want to help you. You have to be genuine and not just saying, like, hey, we're helping companies, blah, 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 blah.
Totally. You mentioned something in our pre-interview that I wanted to follow up on, and it was about you're an empathetic person, which I would disagree with, but we'll agree to disagree. I'm kidding. You're, you are so empathetic, and I'm going to summarize, and I'd love you to kind of explain what you mean. So in my own words, what I remembered you saying was, you're so empathetic that you would feel bad if you didn't cold call this prospect because they wouldn't have your solution. So tell me about that and like how you got there, because I think that's a really interesting thread to pull on.
Yeah, this actually came with it was the second client I got here at Predictable Revenue, and when I understood like what they were doing and the people like how like all their process and what the solution our client was selling could help them. I remember I was shocked. I was like, really? Do they have to do all of this? Like in one department and one person? Like really? How do they sleep at night? Like this is a lot. Like, I was like, and then we're reaching out to big companies, like more than 1,000 employees. And I was like, how do they do it? Like across branches and across all of that. So it was overwhelming the amount of work that they had, and how easy would it be that at that point I was more comfortable with role plays, and we would do role play with a client that I would be so passionate about it. Like, hey, I want to help you. Like, I know you're struggling with this. So that actually kind of like helped with the reluctance of picking up the phone and making calls, because you have to believe in your product. You have to actually understand the problems they're going through. Like, if you understand that someone can lose their job because something they're doing is not right, and you can help them not only like keep their job, but look like heroes to their bosses, you do want to reach out to that person and saying like, I want to help you. Like, I can help you. Like, literally, you could be the hero. Like, I'm not taking credit on that. That would be all you. You just got to listen to me for a minute. So it is real. You're reaching out to people to help them. You're not bothering them. You're not like disturbing or disrupting their day. You're key to this, and you're key for everything. Not only for your company, and because you're representing your company, but you're key to the business, and you're key to the people you're reaching out to, because they might have been struggling for this for months or years. And with 3 minutes on the phone with you, you can help them just like get rid of that pain. Maybe they could just go out earlier and have more time with their family and go on a nice vacation because they don't have to worry about this issue anymore. So I think you really have to understand your market and the persona you're reaching out to, what they do, and really understand their pains. So then you can talk through it, like you can massage that pain during the call. And they could be like, ooh, like you could be like their little spa treat that day for 2 minutes. So yeah.
I mean, I think what you said was super important for two reasons. One, I think 100% helps you overcome phone reluctance because you are so empathetic that if you don't reach out, you're actually doing them a disservice. Two, I think it was a testament to how well you understood not just the customer, not just the company that you're kind of prospecting for, or the solution, which I think is where a lot of SDRs get to. But you had a really deep understanding and appreciation, and you could empathize with the prospect. And I think that ability to empathize with the prospect might have been a turning point for you in the sales development role. Because before, when you think about if this is the Wizard of Oz and the first bit's black and white and the second half is color, this is that moment. I don't remember what happens. House falls on somebody or something, right? And then it goes into color. That was your a house fell on you moment. And then after that, everything was color. Is that fair? Fair assessment?
Yeah, it is. Because after that, the following client I took on, it was the same. I would ask questions to the client, and this is also part of the mindset of the SDR. SDRs are told not to ask a lot of questions to the client, or just let the strategist deal with it, or let the the higher roles deal with it, and SDR, you just make the calls and execute the operation. But no, ask questions, because honestly, a lot of it, I got it from the clients. I would be like, what if this happens? And what if, and I would paint the worst case scenario, what if this prospect happens this and this and this, and the client will be like, yeah, that could happen. And then if that happens, and I wanted to understand the worst, I wanted to understand the worst, because everyone out there wants to stay away from the worst. Your prospect, even though they know it's not likely for the worst case scenario to happen, there's still 1% of chance it happened, and they want to stay away from it. They have to talk to it. Kind of I don't want to say talk to their fear, but it kind of is. But you have to understand it, so you actually can just know the impact, the true impact this could have on it. Because if you speak to the little things, then it won't make a difference. Really, it will, but not as big as the thing that no one wants to happen. Okay.
Totally. You said something interesting there that, as an SDR, you're not necessarily always empowered to go off script or write your own emails. Some organizations are, some are a lot more free. Some are a lot more controlled around the message, around the script, around the people. Yeah. It's a really interesting balance to say, to kind of put yourself in that position. And I love the ownership that you took on this, because that was probably, I think that was a time when we were a little bit more control heavy of SDRs, we'll write the scripts, we'll write the messaging, you must do this, as opposed to, okay, well, here's who you're going after. These are the accounts. These are the types of people. Let's kind of figure this out together. And I think there's a bit of a spectrum. I love that you were given the sort of tight constraints of this is who you're going after and this is why. And you're like, it's okay. I'm going to ask the client, or I'm going to ask my AE. I think it's an example of you going and of you exhibiting another kind of SDR trait that we maybe want to talk about, which is just kind of going above and beyond. And in this case, you went to the client. But if you're an SDR, you could go to your AE, your person in marketing, your product manager, whatever you need to do to understand and gain a really deep understanding of the prospect. I once had a job where I was hired, and a month later, my boss, the CEO of the company who had hired me to sell this thing for them, went on a boat and sailed from Vancouver to New Zealand, which I don't know how good your geography is. That's a long boat ride on a sailboat.
It is.
They went down the Baja Peninsula and down.
Did he make it?
They did a race. Yeah. And then they sailed up to the Mediterranean, and I had zero connection with them after they left. No, I shouldn't say zero. And there were other people there, but I had to go out, and the only, I had two options. I had go figure it out or quit. And I love that you kind of had a similar option. You're like, I could just keep doing the same thing that the script says, or I could go ask questions. Tell me about that. Where did that come from?
Yeah. Actually, it came from, as you've just mentioned, at the beginning, we were kind of like, kind of tied with the SDRs and saying like, don't go off script. Like, this is your, like, our strategists will come and say like, this is the sequence, this is the script, go and follow it, and that's it. So I understand it as well, because I think it's something you have to earn the right. You're going to have to prove yourself and earn the right. Of course, if you're like the first time an SDR, your first week, you won't say, I don't like this, let's change it. Because everyone will be like, okay, why? Like, what's the reason? Why don't you see, like, prove it to me, right? So at that point specifically, I was like already, I wouldn't say like I was convinced I was good, but I was getting better, and I was feeling like more comfortable with the role in order to ask and experiment and see like, you know what, like, I think I have an input and you should listen to it. So I remember that came with one of the, this didn't happen during the client call, but I was looking at the metrics, because that's something as an SDR you must be interested in doing. Look at your metrics. Mm-hmm. If you have great open rates, awesome. But what about your reply rates? Are they any good? Like, is people engaging with your content? Look at your connection rates over the phone. Look at, like the bad data you have, and think about the strategy. Think about how can you fix that. Don't just wait until someone else notices that and say like, oh, this happened, because you're there, you're in the front lines every day, you're dealing with it. So who is best to tell when something is happening or when something is changed than you? So when that happened, I remember I was like, people is not actually engaging with this content. Like, I just, because I knew the persona so much, like I was so invested with that ICP, I was like, I think we should approach them like in a more like human way, or more like, like talk to them in their own language. Like, this is too technical. This is too like, like businessy. I don't know, like too salesy. And then, at the time, my strategy was to be like, no, we'll run it. And he was like, I'm not going to change it. And I was like, well, I will. So I ran it. I created a sequence. I was just being reckless. And I was like, I'm going to create a sequence and I'm going to propose it. So I pushed so much. I was like, tell the client. I would reach out to my manager and would be like, I want to present this because I want this to happen. That, like, because of my manager asked, then the strategy was like, okay, present it. So I presented to the client and said, like, these are the reasons why I believe we should change it and we should try it. And then they were like, you know what? We've never done it. Like, I don't see why not give it a shot. Like, what can we lose? And then we tried and it worked. Like, the response rate was better. So at the end, we ended up like saying like, okay, don't use the old messaging. Let's switch to this one and do it. And that felt good, But I was like, it could be better, like always, like, yes, accept your wins, embrace it, celebrate that, but like think that like the next step, okay, what's my next challenge? And like that's it. Like, take your time to celebrate your wins, yes, but don't let it just be like over your head and saying like, you see what I did? No, because that happened today, but what will happen tomorrow? So that was how I kind of like learned doing it. So I would also go and in LinkedIn, I would love going to LinkedIn and look for people I was doing that, or join, the groups on LinkedIn related to my ICP. That was more like try to learn to see like, what is this people talking about? Like, what is a common topic on them? So maybe I could, on the phone, I could just relate to that if I see a need, so you have to really invest in that. And don't be afraid to experiment, because honestly, what could happen? Like, someone will hang up on you. They will do it anyways, but at least you tried. And at least there's one more thing that that it works or it doesn't work. It's like, okay, I already tried this, so scratch it from the list, didn't work. What's next? And then try the next thing. And then you'll find something at the end that will be like, oh, this is good. And then you're like, okay, I'll keep this, and then I'll keep scratching stuff on my list, and I'll keep testing. And you can collaborate with your strategist or your marketing or content creator or
AE,
copywriter,
your SDR manager.
AE. Exactly. Like, you can just collaborate with them. At the end, you all are a team, and you're all in there with the same goal. and they will want to hear and listen to what you have to say, because at the end, it would be a win for them as well.
I love the part of the story that I love the most is that somebody said it's not your responsibility, but you said, yes, it is. My job here is to not just to book meetings, but to book meetings that are going to turn into customers. And I own that piece. And so I'm going to own how we do this, regardless of what anybody else says. I think that is such an underrated attitude from in sales in general, right? Like the AE who says, oh, I'm not getting enough meetings. You know, my SDR didn't book enough meetings for me. It's like, well, sorry, bud, that's your quota, right? Like, yes, you're getting SDR support, but it's still your quota. As an SDR, oh, I didn't book enough meetings. It's like, well, yes, you were given some sequences, but it's still your number. And
Exactly.
we expect you to hit that, and we'll do everything we can to help. And it's still your number. Yeah. And so I love that you took that ownership.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
We said the same word at the same time, kind of. But
totally.
Yeah. But yeah, it's that same ownership at the end of the day. Like, and I've seen like SDRs out there saying like, oh, the data is not good. Oh, this happened, blah, blah. And it's like, okay, yeah. I mean, honestly, it's fair. Like, everyone just loves like a good rant. It's like, yeah, take it out of your system, but do something other than just like ranting and complaining, you know? Like, it's fine, take it out. But, you know, like, if someone else is not doing it, as you said, it's your quota at the end of the day. And at the end of the quarter, if you didn't hit quota, guess what? You might be on a PIP, or, you know, like whatever other like companies do out there. But there will be consequences, of course. Like, you cannot just be like dragging your quota for a year and expect nothing will happen. And
no,
yeah, ambition is
advancing in the role.
Exactly.
Yeah, if you want to advance in the role, like as a sales leader, what I want to see is consistency, you know, and I want to see consistency in, so let's say I'm the VP of sales or director of sales development. You know, I've got managers under me. They have SDRs under them. I'm going to roll up to a VP of sales or CRO, and I need to deliver and say, okay, I think we're going to produce X number of meetings, which is going to generate Y amount of pipeline, which will turn into Z amount of closed revenue in this time frame. And I want to be as accurate as possible there. And so not only do I want to be accurate, but I'm also going to have goals to hit. And what do I want underneath me? I want people that are reliably going to hit those goals, because I've built a spreadsheet that says, okay, I'm going to assume Jesui is going to produce 10 units, and so-and-so is going to produce 9 units, and so-and-so is going to produce 11 units, and so-and-so is going to produce, and it's this huge sheet, probably not a sheet, probably in Salesforce, but it could be in a sheet, you know, and you're going to model it out. And what you want is to be predictable and reliable and able to grow the org. And that's what the boss's boss is looking for. And so when you're thinking about like advancing, talk to me about predictability, consistency, and any other traits that you see that, you know, when you see SDRs advance. I know you advanced yourself. So when you see other SDRs advancing in their sales development careers or into an AE role or into other roles, what are some of the other skills, traits, habits that they might have?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's like, as an SDR, you do so many things that it kind of opens up the door to grow anywhere you want to. Like, it's a kind of job that people will find annoying and saying like, oh, I don't want to be an SDR. But it's the one that actually you learn so many things. Like, as an SDR, you have to look for your own list. So you become kind of like good at research, like navigating companies, mapping out companies, looking for people, and, you know, like getting in the weeds in there. You also become good, of course, at prospecting and dealing with rejection. And, you know, like you become like so resilient. But also you become, if you create your own sequences and test them, you also become good at content creation. And then you have to kind of have that ambition and wanting to grow. And you also deal with tech stack, and you have to learn how to monitor your domain and saying like, is this okay? Like, something is happening, and you have to learn like to manage well your tech stack in order to just keep moving in your day. So whatever area interests you, like I've seen SDRs, that they are like so invested in the day to day, and you see like the kind of pick up on their strengths and see where they shine. And I've seen SDRs growing into revenue, going to be an AE, which most people will say that that's the natural growth path there, saying like, yeah, as an SDR, after an SDR, then you become an AE or a junior sales role and then an AE or something. And would say like that is the life. But no, actually you have like an open path. Like I've seen SDRs growing into IT roles because they were so invested into their own research and testing new tools to kind of like find more prospects and look for more data and you know, like test their domains and stuff, that they kind of like developed that and they growed into that. And SDRs growing into marketing because they loved creating content and they were so creative while doing it and they enjoyed it, that now they're working in marketing. And then SDRs as AEs. So it really depends on what do you want to do, what do you like. But the SDR role would allow you to go into that. Like you want to grow into management, great. Guess what? You have to manage your own time as an SDR. You have to manage your own quota. Starting on managing that, like knowing like, okay, it's setting your mind and saying like, I'm going to book 2 meetings per week. And then say this week you booked only, I don't know, 1. And then you're like, okay, like I still have to book another meeting to make it up for that. So next week I'm going to book 3 meetings to make up for that. So that means I'm going to increase my cold volume to this, and I'm going to send this many more LinkedIn requests and this many more emails, blah, blah, blah. You can start managing from there. And then you can start managing other things, right? But what I want to say with this is like, to be an SDR requires so many skills at, I wouldn't say like at a higher level, but at the basic at least. And you can pick from those what you like the most and keep like sharpening those and, you know, like grow into whatever path you want to grow.
Love it. Last question before we bring this to a close. I love that we kind of focused on sort of ownership over results, seeking feedback, being consistent. What if there's an SDR or a number of SDRs that are listening to this podcast? They're in their first week or they're in their first month, their first 90 days. What advice would you give them?
This might sound silly, but it worked for me. You know, like when you have like a safety blanket and it's like, I can't sleep when you were a kid, and it's like, oh, some adults might have it as well. Not judge, like, cool, I have one. It's okay. You might have one of those as an SDR, and not literally like a blanket, but celebrate your wins every day. Even if they're like small, there's like nothing as small as a win, and give like a, you know, like a pat on your back. I would have a song to start my day, you know, before saying like, okay, I'm going to sit and make calls. I would put a song to kind of get inspiration on that. And I would also have like a celebration song saying like, yes, I booked the meeting. And I would actually took the time to celebrate. I would be like, yes, and I would stand up. But to kind of like take my day to day, I would also put like some music in the background, just like a lower volume, so I could listen, but it couldn't be like interfering in my calls. And I would split my tasks into blocks. I would be like, okay, so I'm just gonna deal with it, and I don't know, I have 100 calls to make, so I'm gonna split it in blocks to 10 or 15 or whatever. And then after each blog ends, I would be like, I'm gonna grab a snack, I'm gonna walk with my dog, I'm gonna do something, watch like an episode of Friends because I like Friends and that's my comfort zone. So I would be like, I'll watch that, okay, then I'll go back, because you need kind of like that mental break, kind of deal with it. And then you'll realize that while you're doing that, you're kind of reflecting into what just happened in the calls, and you're thinking, and then when you're back, you're like, okay, I'm gonna try this, and you kind of like become creative. So kind of create your own support system, whatever works for you. I just shared what worked for me. It doesn't mean that it will work for you. Whatever you have in mind, do it. Like, you need something to kind of cope with it on a day-to-day. So I would really encourage everyone to have an inspiration song and a celebration song. Please do it out there and share it with your team. Like, honestly, it's so good when you like you just have something that you're looking forward, and you're like, I really want to sing this song, so today's the day. I want to book a meeting and I want to do it. So, in timeshare, we used to pop up champagne when you sell.
Yeah.
You might just crack a beer. I don't know if you're at home. So I remember we have an SDR here that she shared her secret, and she was like, I would sip a little bit of mezcal just to get it going, to get like the value and just like the courage on it, and then just like start my day. Don't become an alcoholic. Like, don't do it. I'm not encouraging everyone to drink during working hours. I'm just sharing, like other people's experiences. Yeah, exactly. But yeah.
Love it. Jesui, thank you so much for coming on the show. I hope that's probably not the only takeaway, but this is certainly an interesting one. I just really appreciate you being open and sharing the stories about, what it was like getting going. And I hope if somebody's listening, they find a couple of helpful tools to help them get through that first week, that first month, because it can be tricky. It can be hard, but it is a great role, and it will earn you an amazing career in sales. And so the more people we can help take that first step, the better. So thank you for coming on.
Yeah. Thank you for inviting me.
Right on. Thanks everybody. We'll see you all next week.